Hi there, welcome back. I hope you had a good workshop or session, either accessible information formats or the gaming demonstration. That's the one I ducked into. Looked fantastic. Sightless Combat, showing how he plays computer games and explaining some of the obstacles that people face with disabilities and some of the ways of getting around them, and showing off his gaming skills, obviously. So on with the show. We started the day talking about the business case for accessibility. We listened to a panel earlier talking about, of business leaders talking about their experience and the business interest in accessibility. I'm really pleased to say that we're going to return to that theme now, but in particular I'm pleased to say that we're going to be welcoming Jenny LaFleury, who's Chief Accessibility Officer at Microsoft and has been a friend of AbilityNet for some time and a well-known figure in this field, and really has made a big difference at Microsoft for us in terms of connecting in and helping to build relations there. She's going to be talking to Casper Klinger, who's new to Microsoft, joined earlier this year. She's going to be talking about his experience of joining an organization where accessibility is part of the culture. And they're going to be hosted and chaired by Samara Latif, who works for Procter & Gamble, who again is a friend of AbilityNet's and someone that we've worked with over time. And her role in Procter & Gamble is to look at accessibility in general and not just technology. So they're going to be talking about culture, the culture of organizations, and also the way in which business makes sense of accessibility and understands what it's capable of and what it can deliver for business. So I'm going to head over now and introduce you to the panel. Thank you.
Everyone. So my name is Sam Latif. It's Samara Latif, you can call me Sam. So as Mark said, I'm P&G's accessibility leader. And in case you don't know P&G, we're kind of all over your home. We mainly are in cleaning and beauty and grooming as well. So you're probably familiar with some of our brands like Ariel in Europe and Tide in the US. And we have Gillette, Pampers, Head and Shoulders, and many, many more brands. Today, I have the pleasure to have an insightful conversation with two brilliant individuals who are pioneering, high impact individuals and advanced in their unique areas of work. And they both happen to work at Microsoft. Jenny, you are a household name. You are the Chief Accessibility Officer in the accessibility world. We all know you and we all love you. I think we first met over 15 years ago. I don't know if you remember that interaction, but a senior IT leader at P&G connected with someone at Microsoft and who put me in touch with you and to talk about accessibility a long time ago. And Jenny, you're really professionalizing accessibility. You're recruiting people with disabilities. And that's so important because only 31% of people who are working age are in employment. So it's a topic that's really close to my heart. And I've seen firsthand how easy it is to discriminate towards people with disabilities. So I really applaud you for that. But also you're creating positive, meaningful experiences with technology, making a positive impact in lives of people with disabilities, people like myself. I absolutely love seeing AI. I love the Be My Eyes disability help desk that you got, and also just to be able to do my job. If it wasn't for Microsoft, I couldn't do my job. So I really, appreciate everything that you've done to make my life easy from an accessibility point of view. Casper, I do not know you yet, but Casper, you're the head of European Government Affairs for Microsoft. And prior to that, you had a diplomatic career as an ambassador for many different countries around the world. And prior to joining Microsoft, you were also Denmark's first and probably the world's first tech ambassador. So perhaps we can start here, Casper. What is a tech ambassador? And why does a company like Microsoft need someone working with government affairs? Oh, and by the way, my cat's just walked in, so he's going to meow, but just ignore that. So yeah, over to you, Casper.
Well, thanks very much, Sam. And I think your cat will give a nice touch to this conversation. And let me just say from the outset that I'm fairly humbled to be having this conversation, both with you, Sam, but also with Jenny. And I also want to, be blunt from the beginning here to say that I have a steep learning curve in better understanding this accessibility discussion and what we need to be doing and how we put that into policies and also the technologies that we're working on in Microsoft. So I think I'm as much here to learn as I am to share sort of insights from my side. Going back to the job I had previously until I joined Microsoft on the 1st of March, we in Denmark came up with this fairly new idea or notion that we needed not only ambassadors to countries or ambassadors to international organizations. We've had them for many years and literally going back hundreds of years. But because of where technology is today and the incredible impact that technology is having, primarily in a positive way, but certainly also in a challenging way, there was a sense that perhaps we also need envoys to have conversations with the technology industry, both nice conversations where we talk about opportunities, and I think accessibility is a pretty good example where technology can have such a dramatic impact for people with disabilities. But I also want to be honest, we had quite a few less pleasant conversations, which was about holding the technology companies to account, avoiding interference in elections, avoiding disinformation, illegal content, but also just encouraging the technology industry to take a societal responsibility because of the huge impact that the industry is having. So, in a short version, I think my job was about building bridges between governments and the industry, without wanting to take it too far, I think actually the job that I have now for Microsoft, sitting in Brussels normally, although COVID-19 is making that a bit difficult, that is actually also about building bridges between governments and I would say Europe and a big technology company like Microsoft. And do we need that? I'm not objective, but I think we need that more than ever before to make sure that both sides build up skills and competences and a better understanding of the other side so that we can take the right decisions in a number of different areas.
Thanks, Casper. And is that the same as this concept that I only came across like 2 days ago called techplomacy? Is that what you've just described or something else?
No, that's exactly what I described, because we, when you represent such a small country as Denmark, and I'm going to refuse to tell you how many citizens we are, because that's just embarrassing when you're talking to big countries. You have to come up with smart notions, and then we decided that diplomacy, everybody understands. Technology, people understand. If you combine those two words, that was sort of something we tried to set in motion. And by the way, it was picked up by many countries around the world. Today, we have many ambassadors or special envoys that are dealing with cybersecurity issues or technology issues or digital issues. So for the first time in a long while, Denmark helped set something in motion that I fundamentally believe is critically important in today's world.
Wow, thank you. So Jenny, maybe Casper is a bit young in the role to answer this, but maybe I can ask you, is there a space or an opportunity for accessibility as part of techplomacy so that we intentionally make everything accessible moving forward for digital?
I've got a big grin on my face for a reason. That's exactly why I'm so excited that Casper's with us today, and Casper's joined the company. And I remember sitting in the audience a few years ago when you were in your previous role, sort of just like, oh my gosh, we need this, because I think societal areas that Casper, you've put your arms around over years. Accessibility is absolutely in the same bucket, and so it's really exciting to learn from Casper, to learn from what we can do with techplomacy to move this forward. I don't know, Casper, what do you think? We pulled you into the fore on this one.
try and avoid embarrassing myself in front of two superstars like the two of you. But I think, you know, Jenny, let's be honest. We had a conversation. Well, we've had many conversations, but a conversation a few days ago where we were sort of comparing notes on how do you drive forward innovation in the policy area or in areas where we think there is a need for change. And I think that might be, you know, one area where you compare a little bit what we did with diplomacy, trying to disrupt, you know, the traditional way of looking at how countries interact with each other and what it means to really have, you know, envoys in the hotspots of transformation. And you know, in today's world, those hotspots are, you know, both Silicon Valley, I have to mention Redmond, but I think Shenzhen and a couple of other places are really where a lot of change are happening. But I think, you know, what you guys have been doing for a long time, to some extent has been, I guess, accentuated by what we're seeing with COVID-19, in the sense that we know how technology can be a game changer for people to retain their jobs and for the economy to be less affected than had, you know, the global pandemic taken place, you know, 10, 15 years ago. On the other hand, you know, I think if you look at an area like accessibility, it's so obvious that technology can also make a huge difference for a lot of people around the world. But we also, I think, need to push this agenda forward. And you know, one of my favorite sentences is never let a crisis go to waste. And to some extent, I would love to learn from you and Sam, you know, can we actually use COVID-19 as a game changer for making sure there's much more focused on accessibility? And, you know, I'll be the first one to be very honest with you in saying that I have not paid enough attention to this area before joining Microsoft. And actually having conversations with you, Jenny, and with you, Sam, also helps me better understand, you know, how we make sure that our conversations with the European Union or with European governments, that we put this at the forefront because of the massive impact this can have for people.
Yeah. I mean, policy is extremely important, Casper, to make change happen. And lack of policy is often the problem for minority groups like people with disabilities. So, you know, take COVID, for example. If products like Zoom or WebEx or Teams, these are tools that we are using day in, day out to work from home, to do our jobs. Now, what would have been even more helpful is to have them working accessibly from the outset. But there, you know, I don't know if we can build that into policy so that you know, for me, it's like baking a cake. You know, accessibility is a key ingredient, like sugar. It's something that needs to be done from the outset, but it's not always thought about by policymakers. And so the end result is people like me who can't use things, we feel excluded because by the time it comes to market, by the time you touch it as a consumer, it's way too late, you know, and then you're having to campaign and to get things fixed. So how can we systemically include accessibility into policy making, and how do we work with the EU or the UN or these people in positions of power to help them understand the impact it has, you know, on you from a society? It's not just I can't use this, but what's the additional impact it has, you know, like the emotional impact of feeling excluded or not being able to do a job because things are not accessible. So how can we educate or turn around policymakers?
And Sam, was that a question for me or for Jenny?
It was a question for you.
Okay. Well, I think I can try and answer that, but I actually think Jenny is also the right one to come in and help perhaps get more granularity on the answer. Well, I think first of all, having somebody like Jenny or somebody like you in P&G is a pretty good starting point because you know, without comparison at all, I think when you are trying to make change or to do things differently, you need to have, you know, ambassadors or in your case, sort of superheroes that are pushing this agenda forward in a way where we're using both a bit of carrot and a bit of stick, because otherwise you don't have the impact that is needed. And one of the things that I really enjoy working for Microsoft, and again, I'm a complete newbie, I've just been here since the 1st of March, but I think this multidisciplinary approach where, you know, you have engineers sitting together with people like Jenny, perhaps you add a couple of policy people like myself or somebody from my team, and you bring those different ingredients together from the outset so that the technologies of tomorrow, that it's not an add-on to make sure that the functionality also works for people with disabilities. I think that's just a fundamental starting point. But I would also say, just being a little bit selfish, looking at myself and my team in Brussels, you know, having somebody like Jenny and her team reminding us on a daily basis, and also being a bit tough with us once in a while when we're not focusing enough on these issues, that we have to make sure, as we have dialogues with you know, European decision makers, either in Brussels or across Europe, that this is an issue we need to push. I mean, we want standards that makes this mandatory. It's not something that is nice to have. It's something that has to be a fundamental part of the technologies that we're building for tomorrow. And the last thing I just wanted to say, perhaps before Jenny can say something much smarter about this, is that I think COVID-19 has showed that this digital divide that we talk a lot about, also at the global level, well, that digital divide is also present, you know, in our case in Europe, where people have been harder hit by COVID-19 in terms of unemployment. And, you know, I know that also people with disabilities have been proportionally harder hit than others. We have to make sure also as a technology company that we take our responsibility very seriously to make sure that we have inclusive technologies that really caters for the kind of complexities that the worlds are facing. And again, I think COVID-19 is a game changer that we should take advantage of.
Yeah, you can't play the newbie card anymore, Casper.
When does that come out, Jenny?
It's gone. And Sam, I have to love that your cat is appearing in the background in this.
Can you see him? I wasn't sure.
Yes, yes, definite guess in this. You know, I think Casper's got it so beautifully right here. It just in terms, of course, might know what he's doing maybe a little bit, but the beauty of accessibility is that when it comes to policy, at least, is that this becomes table stakes. When you have table stakes accessibility set within accessibility regulations and policies, it sets the bar for where companies need to achieve. And it sets that goal line, at least minimum bar. And I would never want it to be the goal. Because as we know, the policies are woefully behind the use of technology, but it sets a line that companies can get after in terms of understanding what they may need to do. Or if it doesn't exist, it becomes kind of, how can I innovate and create? And sometimes that leads to incredible, beautiful results. And I love that you had Sightless Combat on before this, who's a blind gamer and has really innovated within the gaming infrastructure and an amazing gaming accessibility world that's popped up without a lot of accessibility policy and regulation. But also it's definitely an area where I'd much rather have at least a lot more in that. The challenge then is kind of your point, Sam, of making sure that we all have technology that we can need and use and work and live. You quoted some stats there of, was it 31% in the workforce in the UK? The number here in the US is 20%. And I think, and then you look at the unemployment rate on top of that in the US, that's double that of people for people with disabilities versus not. So we're looking at 13.4% of that 20% are also out of work, as opposed to 66% non-disabled yet, being in the workforce, and 7.6%. So you've got a massive gap, and technology has a big part to play in that. And I would say COVID has been one of those amazing sort of learning periods for us, where we did have at least that minimum bar, but we've also had to learn a lot during this period. You know, Teams as one example, we had. We were lucky enough to really be ahead of the game on this in so many ways. Clearly not perfect, but you know, ahead of the game, thanks to honestly our blind community partnering deeply with our engineering team on it a couple of years ago, which has continued. But did we have it set right for every aspect of the disability community? No. We learned very quickly that captioning was utterly invaluable. That grew 30x overnight in Teams. But we've also had to add in a lot of additional features, and there's some, also in the works for sign language interpreters, for example, and some other situations that we've learned. So it's an iterative process. But I think it really is the building blocks of having policy on top, and then the operations on top of that help to make it a reality. Does that help them?
Yes, it does. And I have a particular idea or example where I think policy, if we could build accessibility policy, we would really transform people's lives. So Casper, I don't know, do you know what audio description is?
Don't.
So basically, blind people, it's the opposite of captioning, I would say, and it's a service for the blind. So if you're watching a film or an advertising, there's a voice that describes what's going on visually in the screen, like the robber jumps onto the bed or whatever it might be. And that's a separate track that you can put on your TV. You can turn it on like captioning. Are you with me?
I am, and I've actually tried that without knowing what the terminology.
Oh, is it annoying you? Yeah, it tells you everything you're seeing. Yeah. So this is like gold dust for blind people. It's something that almost every Hollywood film has built in. So, some of the major filmmakers are already doing this. P&G is the only advertiser probably like globally doing this yet. But we're only doing it in the UK, Spain, and the US. And the reason we're not doing it in other European markets yet, primarily, is because there isn't a policy. The governments haven't enforced this. They're not asking companies to do this. So as a result, in many countries, blind people have never even tasted audio description. And that really, it really makes me so sad to know that people like me in countries like, Italy, I don't want to like name them, but many countries cannot see films with audio description. They cannot see advertising with audio description. And yet we as P&G want to do it, but there's more than one player here, that we need governments to set down policy maybe. We need, broadcasters to be committed to provide the pipes that will broadcast the audio description. And then we need content creators like P&G to provide that audio description. How can we get something like this in place? Because it doesn't cost a lot. It only costs $300 to make one ad with audio description. Nothing. It's peanuts for us to do. Yet it really impacts hugely on the blind community. But how can we make this a reality in every country?
Well, if I say a few words to begin with, and then again, Jenny, you will probably say something a lot more insightful than I will. I am European, as you can note out here in my accent, and I do think that policy reigns supreme in a lot of these areas. So a good starting point, I would assume, is to make sure that these requirements are built in as a pretty standard thing in our policies. And I don't know whether you can make a comparison, but a few years ago we had the General Data Protection Regulation coming into effect. I was actually working in Silicon Valley at that stage, and there wasn't a single technology company I met in my old job where we didn't hear complaints about what Europe was doing and how awful this was in terms of all the obligations that it put on technologies and technology companies. Fast forward till today, I think very few companies haven't implemented GDPR as a universal approach and basically giving the same facilities to customers and consumers around the world. And I do believe, and again, I'm biased because I'm working out of Europe and I have responsibility for Europe, but I think the European Union hopefully can remain sort of a powerhouse in implementing gradually higher and higher standards across the board, including on accessibility. And I would assume that's a pretty good starting point in making sure that it's not something you have to be grateful for, that you have access to this functionality when you're watching a movie, but it's something that is an obligation for movie creators that we build into it. And similarly, I think this is again where what we've learned from COVID-19 is the necessity of making sure that everybody's on board in the bus. This digital divide, of course, is perhaps more evident on accessibility than any place else. But I just want to say, people all over Europe, including in Europe, that are without access to broadband, that simply doesn't have the possibility to maintain their jobs because of lack of access to technology. And again, I don't claim that I fully understand or have insights around accessibility, but I would assume, that's almost a double stammer for people with disabilities. If you don't have access to the critical infrastructure, that's a bad starting point. But then if the technologies are not set up to make sure you have basic functionality around accessibility, that's an addition on top that makes it very difficult, certainly during a global pandemic, but also wider than that.
So in your role as, in your relationship with the European government, is that something that you would be able to advocate for, or do we do it individually? It's interesting to know how do you make that change happen, like you described with the GDPR?
Well, again, I think just the fact that we have Jenny and her team is a fantastic starting point, because Jenny, she will remind us, I'm pretty sure, on a regular basis on the need to focus on this. And if I don't do my job, I'm also pretty sure that she will complain to my boss to make sure that I get those instructions crystal clearly from above as well. But I'm fortunate enough to have on my team some super dedicated people that are not only focused on accessibility, but actually enthusiastic about it. And they're working on a daily basis with European decision makers, with European policymakers. We've been working, I think, hand in hand in developing the European Accessibility Act, focusing on European standards on accessibility. And I think that's a starting point. But with all other policy work, of course, Rome was not built on one day. It's a continuous effort where we have to remind everybody. And again, one of my concerns, and I hope that I'm wrong on this one, is that we're focusing a lot similarly on sustainability. And I think we had some concerns, would COVID-19 take away the focus on sustainability? And I think similarly, perhaps as we look at accessibility issues, we need to use the global pandemic as an opportunity to do more. But I guess we also have to be absolutely sure that we ring fence the progress that has already been made on accessibility, and make sure that this crisis is not misused to lower the attention or to not focus on the next steps necessary. And I think that's a job that I and my team are taking quite seriously.
Yeah, I will say, Sam, if I just add in quick, I do think that this is such a great example of the importance of audio description, how much it's come even more to the fore through the COVID-19, where we've seen that dependence on accessibility has been utterly top of the radar. Efforts by amazing advocates like you driving audio description top of the list in terms of what you're doing within your company, other companies doing some of the same, putting pressure onto the system. So you've got expertise happening within private industry, you've got public that is the role model that we all want to aspire to be. I think you've got a great recipe that would mean that this could be a great topic as one of several that I think we're going to probably have to pursue collectively as we move through this never-ending pandemic and really take the learnings from that. So I think it's a great one that you flagged, and I think it's for us definitely on the radar. I mean, like you, we have an in-house team that does our audio descriptions. It's important in everything that we do. Are we doing every single language in the way that everyone? No, we've definitely still got some capability to build, but it's absolutely up there. So I think it's a great one to tee up for sure.
Excellent. You'll put it on your scorecard to make sure Casper helps out in that.
Game on, game on.
Jenny, many people, we often think of like accessibility as a discipline for making digital or specifically websites accessible. But, how about, thinking about accessibility in a more broader, delightful experience? like, you know, doing your grocery shopping or booking a holiday. For me as a blind person, I love shopping with Tesco, which is a UK grocery retailer. I love using their app. It's very accessible, good fun to use. But even if I go to the store, it's a really good experience. Their staff are intuitive, helpful. You know, I can get my grocery shopping done in any way I want, with tech, without tech. When it comes to booking a flight, for example, I can't do that independently at all. You know, the websites suck. They're not very good at all. I can't do it. I have to ask someone else. I feel uncomfortable, and so I don't probably book as many flights as I want. You know, what are your thoughts around thinking about accessibility more holistically? And are you doing any of that in Microsoft?
Yeah, I think you paint the absolute opportunity there is for us to have a more inclusive, accessible world that is the difference between a company getting your pound or dollar or whatever currency or not, right? I mean, that's I know in the UK, the purple pound is often used as a description of that. If you're accessible, if you're inclusive, people are gonna want to buy your groceries. If you're not accessible, inclusive, they're not gonna buy your flights. In more fundamental parts of life, that could be the difference between access to education, access to employment, and different scenarios. So yeah, I mean, I think accessibility is an ecosystem. And so while we may look at each individual area of it, and by the way, I don't think that's just the nerdery, I think that's a lot more than just a piece of code. You know, Microsoft, we look across all of the different dimensions of the company and just say, is our hiring process there? Do we have physical accessibility at the bar that we want? Do we have internal accessibility in tools, as well as the different pieces of Word or Excel or Xbox and what have you? Our supplier and procurement processes, is it embedded in our sales and marketing conversations? So we're getting awareness of accessibility out to our customers. So we look at it as the ecosystem, and then within that ecosystem, there's clearly different scenarios that we go deep on. Tesco's isn't on the list, Sam. So, you know, I've clearly got to take that one back. Although, my gosh, do I miss Tesco's? She says sitting in Seattle. I'm very jealous. I would love to go to Tesco's. But we do look at work scenarios. We do look at play scenarios. Clearly, we're a big gaming company. We do look at different scenarios like navigation, and as you've probably seen with Soundscape and 3D audio to help you get to Tesco's, and then seeing AI once you're in Tesco's. So sometimes it's how you put the building blocks together. And I think holistically, are we at the point where I feel like I've got a complete horizontal lens? No, there's probably a lot more that I need to do there, but we do look at this at a human level as opposed to a code level, if that makes sense. And it all accrues up. So when I mean human, it's kind of how is somebody opening that Word document, getting into it? How's that usability experience? How are they then posting it to OneDrive? You know, and then you tack on other things for that as well. So yes, does that give you some sense?
Yes, no, absolutely. Another question is for you, Jenny. What is the biggest barrier, in your opinion, to implement accessibility in an organization like Microsoft?
So I feel really lucky. I'm coming up 5 years in this role, and you know, 16 years at Microsoft. I originally started across the pond to work on Hotmail in London many years ago, and moved into this. And it's been fascinating to see the journey, how it's evolved over time, and to see how it's kind of slowly grown in areas. And that's not to say it's been a gorgeous, ever increasing graph curve going up the right way. It's definitely had roller coaster moments. But I think we did take a very methodical shift 5 years ago to think about it differently, and that was a really grand experiment in hindsight. And I would say Brad Smith, who's the president of that Casper and I both work for, took a bet on us, honestly, and took a bet on accessibility and a vision which was not just about thinking about the code, which is really how accessibility is traditionally been thought of, is, you know, you fix a piece of nerdery and you're good to go. And you get it to the minimum bar and you're good to go. And we were like, no, it's way bigger than that. We've got to lean into not just the products and the websites, but we've got to embed inclusive design. We also have to think about the people processes, because if you have talent with disabilities in the core of the company, that ecosystem just drives itself. You've got people with disabilities giving us the feedback we need and telling us when things are right and also when things are wrong, that empowers us to keep the cycle moving. So we also really put a kick into hiring talent and really amplifying talent and empowering talent with disabilities, and then moving into lots of other areas. We actually built an accessibility maturity model to evaluate where we were at and then sort of manage it over time and measure it. In fact, I was even last week walking the SLT through where we are with our maturity model and what we need to hit on now. And so with every step of the process, I think there's been different challenges. And I think, you know, everyone's like, well, you have an advocacy role. And I would say that after 5 years of pushing, you know, this motion forward, this is an operations job. This is a role where you have to understand where you are, deeply get curious about what the issues are, and then advocate and problem solve for those to be addressed systematically. So you're not fixing it every year, you're fixing it once and done. Generalized problems, there's always more to do than time in the day. Prioritization is key, whether that's, again, a piece of code or it's what talent pool are we going to go after. Budgets, just making sure that we've got all the dots tick and tied. And I would say education and understanding of accessibility is not where I'd ideally want it to be. I mean, I'm so thrilled that, like, Casper, you're joining open my, you know, let me learn, soak this up, take this forward, because I want everyone to learn the basics of accessibility, what it is to be a person with a disability, the reliance and dependency we have on technology and other components, and be able to talk about that, amplify that with confidence. So yeah, three things that are definitely challenges as you go through, and it depends where you are as to where they come up.
Thank you. Yeah, I would love to learn more about your maturity model. Jenny, maybe we could take that offline as well. I'd love to know how it works and whether I can pinch it.
It's yeah, we put it online, Sam. So we actually posted a version of it. It's not all of the widgets that we use internally, but it's online, and we'll get you the link. I think it's Accessibility Evolution Model off our website. So yeah, we'll get you all that.
Okay. And Casper, like, what's been the biggest, you've been in this role since March 1, and Jenny thinks you're already fully onboarded and know everything. But what's the one big thing that you've learned that's been the biggest surprise to you so far in relation to accessibility?
Yeah, listen, don't believe everything Jenny says, especially not. And you know, she might be missing, you know, Tesco, but she has Costco that I'm missing after having moved away from the US. Listen, I'll, you know, again, I'll be very honest in saying that, you know, accessibility wasn't on my radar screen at the level where it should have been before me joining Microsoft. But, you know, she's been very kind to say nice stuff about me, and I'm paying her to say that. So we'll connect offline to do the transaction afterwards, Jenny. But I actually remember, you know, all the way back, even before I joined Microsoft, I had the opportunity to spend a few days in Redmond at an annual event. And I actually remember Jenny taking the floor in sort of a big meeting, emphasizing, you know, issues around accessibility, around policies, and why it is that we need to do that. And that had a pretty big impact on me. So, you know, when I first had the opportunity to talk to her, first of all, I recognized that I had a steep learning curve, and I needed to learn a lot more about what we need to do in this area. But actually, and I'm really going into dangerous territories. And if I say something politically incorrect, you have to forgive me for that. But my understanding is also that we're doing it because there's the right thing to do. But actually, a lot of the innovation that is coming out of focusing on disabilities has a very nice spin-off effect that is actually, from a commercial point of view, also valuable for a company like Microsoft. One of the things that we're focusing on in Europe right now is the automatic translation systems where you get the subtitles below on Teams or on the functionality that is extremely helpful in a European Union with 27 different member states. So, for example, in the European Parliament, that functionality is absolutely essential, not least for the Parliament to work during a global pandemic. So my guess is, or my question rather, is also that what we're doing here and also advocating for stronger policies. Hopefully that's also something that is helpful for our business as we, further expand our technologies. We innovate, we find new functionalities that might be from the outset focused on accessibility, but that might have, fantastic spin-off effects and really create sort of an environment of innovation. And I think, again, this multidisciplinary approach where we make sure that those functionalities are thought into design processes from the beginning. I think that's such an helpful way of working and something you can actually get inspiration on in many different areas, not necessarily working on accessibility. So I guess what I'm trying to say in a not very elegant way is that, trying to be at the forefront of innovating new technologies that works for people with disabilities, that's also a good thing for a business like Microsoft ultimately. Jenny, come in and correct me if I'm wrong. And again, apologies if I said something that was so inappropriate here.
No, you are not. I'm grinning and smiling at your comments, because I think that's all too often, I think accessibility is perceived as something, gosh, when I came into the role, we did a listening tour and people described it as a tax, which I found quite fascinating, because history doesn't tell us that. History tells us that, talking books and Audible came out of, books for the blind, gosh, Sam, how many years ago now?
Yeah.
Captioning came for the deaf, fluorescent lights came out of accessibility, door handles, magnetic zips. I mean, history tells us that this is really, innovation is why, it is the benefit of designing with and through and for people with disabilities. And we've definitely seen that, whether it's the adaptive controller, Seeing AI, which we all love and adore, which was a hackathon project. Both of them were actually. And gosh, we're now seeing Project Tokyo, which is looking at AI and AR, really just, if you think about a HoloLens and individuals who are blind getting a better understanding of who's sitting at a dinner table, thanks to technology. I mean, it's powering a completely different wave of innovation. So I'm love that was your your takeaway. It's why I think so many are now flocking to accessibility across our companies. It's seen as a cool job. It's not an easy job, but it's seen as a really cool one, I think. I'm biased.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I'm probably biased too, but I absolutely love it. And I love the fact, Casper, that you're able to recognize that actually people with disabilities are fueling innovation. But so it's almost time up. Gosh, I don't know where the time went. I didn't know what kind of questions I was going to be asking you. But we've managed to fill the time. But as a closing remark, I was wondering if you were going to summarize your thoughts into a comment or a tweet to leave something with listeners or viewers, what would that be?
Jenny, you go first here because I have to.
I was going to throw it to you first. I
would finish putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I love it. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm drinking coffee. My clogs are turning as fast as they can. I think that accessibility has never been important than it is today. I think that if we say nothing else, That's the nature of the beast. And we've done so much as an industry, and I'm not talking about one company, I'm talking collectively, because we have been powered by talent with disabilities that have really fueled that going forward. But there's a lot more to do. And I think if there's any learning from these times, from this year, gorgeous year that it's been, and as we think to the future, I think we've got to continue to partner together to build a better future and embed that into our infrastructure, into our policies and regulations. And we need to do that by bringing everyone together. To make a difference. So that's not a tweet. That's not
that's over your tweet. Yeah, you went over character limit.
Yeah, that's more like a LinkedIn post. So I'm sticking with that.
But sorry. Casper, can you do a tweet? Can you do a tweet, please?
There was 25 tweets and 3 LinkedIn. Actually, I mean, I will fail at this one as well, but I actually wanted to tell you a sort of small anecdote from my own team in Brussels. We have a young guy on our team with a hearing disability, and it was interesting for me and also for my leadership team. We were discussing, how frustrated we all were with working from home and how much we were looking forward to getting back in the office, the touch points, the socialization, being human beings in the same room together. And then, this guy came forward and said, he'd never had a better time than during COVID-19 because he could use the technologies that we have. He was on Teams. He never had a problem understanding the discussions and participating in the discussions. And that was really an eye-opener, I think, for a lot of us in saying, okay, that kind of flexibility is something that we shouldn't just focus on during COVID-19, but we also need to focus on afterwards. So making sure that, when we talk about inclusivity or diversity in teams, that we use actually technology as a way of making that possible, also in a world where hopefully the apocalypse is soon going to be over. So again, I failed completely on tweets. I will try and think about it after this session and put something out. But I think this sort of constant learnings from looking at that is something that is having an impact on a lot of us, including those of us who haven't paid attention enough in the past.
Absolutely. And I think this is just a start. It would be great to keep, the dialogue going across the industry. So I really appreciate the fact that you joined TechShare and came along and had a fireside chat, and you were thrown in the deep end, Casper, I think. So well done. And Jenny, thanks very much as usual for pushing accessibility with our new government affairs person at Microsoft. So Casper and Jenny, thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thanks a lot.
And thank you guys from the studio here, Jenny, Casper, and Sam. That was fantastic. What a brilliant way to roll all that conversation up together. Sam, you did a fantastic job in the chair. Thank you. Jenny and Casper, brilliant to hear what's going on inside Microsoft, and in particular Casper. Great to hear the real story. As you say, the learning that you're doing. Along the journey of being within Microsoft and the contrast to your understanding before. And I think it really does set us all, I'm treating us as the accessibility community, looking outwards at what's going on around us. And I think this is a great time to be making the case for accessibility and telling people why this is important. I don't think there's any reason why we should worry about emphasizing the business benefit that Casper mentioned, the innovation that comes, the market reach, all the other things that we've talked about today, but also just understanding who's involved in this conversation and where they may be starting from and where they're going to go to next. So what a fantastic session. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your thoughts there. So before we finish, we've got an extra segment here. AbilityNet, as well as running TechShare Pro, runs the Tech4Good Awards. We've run them for the 10th time this year. They're an annual awards ceremony. We're supported by PT with that. And in those awards, we've always had an accessibility award. And the accessibility award over the years has brought together lots of different programs and projects. Be My Eyes, you're going to hear from Alexander on Thursday, was a winner a couple of years ago as an example. And we like to highlight, at TechShare Pro, we just like to highlight and shine a light on the amazing things that our winners are doing. So this year the winner is Clarion, Open Up Music. I don't know whether Barry can join me. I'm hoping he can. He's gonna come in. Hi Barry, how you doing?
Hello.
Good, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, yeah.
Fantastic. So had you entered the Tech4Good Awards this year? Had you come across them before?
So no, this was, we'd obviously come across them before, and this is the first year we'd entered, and yeah, we were absolutely overjoyed to win this year. It's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, it's yeah, what can I say? Absolutely brilliant news.
Cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to find out a bit more about what you do. This is an odd thing for us because we've done this whole thing virtually again, as well as TechShare Pro. We did Tech4Good virtually. So normally we would have either at least touched something or seen something that you actually have because it's a physical thing that you've made. But this year round we haven't actually seen it. So I'm hoping you're going to sort of lead us through the process of what you've got and how you built it and why it's there and all the amazing things it can do. So over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. So yeah, my name is Barry. I'm the chief executive of an organisation called Open Up Music. Just to describe myself very quickly, I'm 5'11". I'm bald. I have a goatee beard, and I have earrings that are quite large, so they're kind of ear gauges at the bottom of my ears. And I have a big cheesy grin. I have two boys who are aged 9 and 13 who may well ignore my request for them to be quiet this evening. Hopefully they won't, and they'll give me a little bit of peace for the duration of this presentation. I'm going to describe all images that are up in the presentation, and I'm going to make sure that I read every word that is on the screen. So I'll start with the slide that we have now, which is the Open Up Music logo. The logo itself is very colourful. It's made up of a series of coloured triangles that are all joined together behind the words Open Up Music. And it's been designed to make it look like a piece of paper that is unfolding. The next slide I'd like to show you is our mission. And we have a very simple mission, which is to open up music to young disabled musicians. And one way in which we do that is through the creation of new accessible musical instruments like the Clarion. So on the next slide, you'll be able to see there are 3 computer screens. On the right-hand side, you've got something called an eye gaze computer, which has a series of coloured rectangles that kind of squiggle along the middle of the screen. Underneath that, you've got the eye gaze sensor, and that's to enable people to interact with the computer using their eyes. And on the left, you have 2 iPads. Again, there's lots of coloured shapes on both of those screens. And what you're looking at is the musical instrument, the Clarion. I'll be telling you a lot more about it in a little bit, but basically it's an instrument that you can play with any part of your body, including your eyes. It's highly customizable, so you can lay it out in whichever way suits you best as a musician. As we were just saying, it picked up one of this year's Tech4Good Awards, something that we've been absolutely overjoyed about. And it is used in both of the musical programs that Open Up Music runs. So the first of those is a program called Open Orchestras. There are currently 40 open orchestras dotted all over the country, and those are delivered not by us, but by other organisations. What we've done is pulled together a holistic package of support. So there's training, there's mentoring, there's schemes of work, there's access to the Clarion, and also to lots of musical repertoire that has been reworked to make it accessible. We're working with a very, very broad range of young people through open orchestras, and the orchestras themselves are delivered by music education hubs, which are dotted all over the country, schools, and also arts organisations. Together, we're supporting over 450 of the UK's most marginalised young musicians through open orchestras. There's an awful lot of detail that I could go into about the Open Orchestras programme. I don't have time to do it here, but one other thing to say is that these are not traditional orchestras. One of the things that we observed and that many disabled people find is that the traditional orchestral model is itself quite a disabling model. It's something that's quite fixed. The musical instruments, the musical repertoire, even becoming a conductor, you are literally on a platform, and that can be very inaccessible. All of the orchestras that we have developed and support are young person centered. The instruments, the repertoire, the way that we work is wrapped around the creativity and the needs of young people. And that is also the case with the National Open Youth Orchestra. So up here we've got the logo for the National Open Youth Orchestra. It's also worth saying that we don't actually have one fixed logo. This is often an animated GIF, so that the graphics that sit on the left, on the right hand side you've got the words National Open Youth Orchestra, but on the left you've got a series of shapes made up of circles and a pink flower shape. Those change and can be reformed and reimagined, restructured by the young musicians that make up the National Open Youth Orchestra. And what we're saying in having a logo that constantly changes shape is that flexibility is the heart of accessibility. The National Open Youth Orchestra is the world's first disabled-led national youth ensemble. It's delivered in partnership with some of the UK's leading arts and cultural organisations, the Barbican, the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, Bristol Beacon. It's also delivered in partnership with the Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra and several other partners across the UK. The first performances were planned for this spring. So unfortunately, they didn't go ahead because of COVID. But rest assured, we are working hard. The orchestra are pulling together material now, which we will be releasing next year. So please do look us up. Make sure to connect with us through our social media channels, and you'll be some of the first people to see the creative output of the National Open Youth Orchestra. So just to say a little bit about what underpins all of our work, and specific to this presentation, the development of the Clarion, is the social model of disability. Now, I'm aware that lots of people on this call will be very familiar with the social model of disability, but for those that aren't, I'm just going to very briefly go through it. The social model of disability says that disability is caused by the way that society is organised, rather than by a person's impairment or difference. It looks at ways of, so I'm just going to progress to the next slide. Oh, that's jumped too far, apologies. It looks at ways of removing barriers that restrict life choices for disabled people. Now, an analogy that's often used is that of a wheelchair user. So a wheelchair user is not disabled until there is a flight of stairs and no lift. And so it puts the onus of responsibility on society to change. Society to ensure that the disabling barriers that restrict life choices for people are removed. And those barriers are present within music as they are within many areas of society. So talking specifically about musical instruments, well, if you think about it, most musical instruments require 2 hands and 10 very dexterous fingers to be able to play them. Most instruments are also fixed. You can't change their structure. For example, a guitar is shaped like a guitar because it has to be shaped like a guitar. You can't move it around and break it in half and restructure it dependent on the needs of the musician. Similarly, musical repertoire. can be very disabling. Most repertoire has been written for those instruments, and those instruments are often inaccessible to many people. Also, most repertoire has been written to be played as written, notes in a particular order. I've got a lovely example here of a piece of music that really articulates this fact. It's a piece that disables most people that listen to it. It's called Impromptu. It was composed by Michael Nyman for the 1997 film. So yeah, we could listen to that now, please. So if we could just stop the music now, please. So I don't know how much we heard of that because I'm not getting the audio feed at my side. But that is a variation on Impromptu in G flat major by Franz Schubert that has been reworked to be playable only by a pianist with 12 fingers. It is a piece of music that unless you have 12 fingers, you can't play. And for many of the young people that we work with, a lot of music is like that. So I often use it as a really wonderful example of how music itself is a societal structure that can disable people. So now talking again about the musical instrument, the Clarion. Well, there were several challenges that we identified in working with young people. Sorry, this is okay. So young people told us that they faced barriers in playing a musical instrument independently. And we worked with teachers and pupils who also told us that sometimes understanding a musical instrument could be a barrier that prevented young people from actually making music. The cost of a musical instrument was also identified, and an instrument that young people could take home to practice on was also a barrier that we sought to address. A lot of assistive music technology can be very expensive. It can be very complicated to play and to use. And it can sometimes be quite large and bulky, which prevents people from taking it home to practice on. For us, it was really important that this was a musical instrument that could be played independently, was simple to set up, but challenging to master. It was affordable, and it was also an instrument that could be taken home by young musicians to practice on at home. We utilized a participatory design methodology, which is a kind of cyclical process, which empowers end users as designers. And what that results in is an end product that's really closely aligned to the needs of those end users. So I'm just going to play a video now, which shows a little bit of the early prototype design process.
Instruments were even created that could be played by moving your head or just by moving your eyes.
Exciting to think, wow, I've just made a piece of music by myself. Obviously I've been working closely with Barry.
Yeah, we can make it a little bit better though, can't we?
Yeah.
What should we change about it to kind of improve it?
The sound.
Yeah.
Originally it was difficult to play because there was a dot in the centre of the screen and I had to move it with my head, but I moved it too much and I didn't really know what note I was playing. So they modified it over the sessions.
Left hand one first.
They've made a pipe and I go blow
To the beginning.
through a pipe to make the sound.
And then play that chord again.
Now it's better than it was originally because they've took my ideas on board and made it possible.
So that shows one of the young musicians that we worked in very, very close partnership with to design and develop some of the prototypes that led to the Clarion. We have another video here of another young musician who also contributed to the design process. So yeah, if we could just watch the next video.
Open up music. Josh can move his eyebrows. There are 2 reflective dots on his face, above and below his right eye, being measured by an infrared camera. As he raises his eyebrows,
hey, hello.
He plays a musical instrument.
You must be shattered, Mark.
The higher his eyebrows go, the more notes he plays.
Yeah. Oh, you're doing really well. But you've got, I know you're not speaking, but you're still listening because you're still commenting on stuff afterwards. So I think, well. I know, it's fantastic, isn't it? I just had to pause it because I don't know if it would work while I was talking to you. Yeah.
So I'm just going to try and progress to the next slide. Apologies. So okay, so yeah, those were very early prototypes of the Clarion, which has since become quite sophisticated as a musical instrument. On this slide, on the right-hand side, you have an iPad with 2 coloured circles on it. That is the Clarion, but that's just one way in which you can lay the Clarion out. So answering the design challenges that were highlighted to us by young people and by staff, the Clarion is an expressive musical instrument that can be played completely independently. It is highly customizable. So as I said earlier, you can change the layout of the Clarion to whatever suits the needs and the creative interests of the young musician. It's very accessible and it's also very affordable. It can be installed on the devices that young people use day in and day out as part of their learning, and in that way they can also take it home to practice on as well. So the musical instrument is expressive. The Clarion is an expressive musical instrument. You can have control over dynamics, which is like volume, and you can change the attack and release of each note, which means that you can change how pronounced the note is depending on how quickly you move your finger around or your eyes around a screen. It is very customizable. So the graphic of the Clarion has now changed to the editing window. There are 5 coloured circles on the screen, one of which is selected. And I believe, yeah, someone is changing the note that is played when you touch the yellow circle. Clarion musicians can easily alter every aspect of their instrument to make sure that it meets their individual and often complex needs. So an example would be, well, actually I'm about to show several different slides that show different windows of the Clarion, which I will describe. So on this slide, there are 5 coloured circles that are all overlapping. Each of these circles is loud at the top and quiet at the bottom. And if you move your finger around quickly, or your eyes around quickly, or the mouse around quickly on the screen, the notes will be staccato, they'll be very sharp. you will hear the note begin quite loudly and it will end quite abruptly. If you move your finger or eye or mouse around the screen slowly, the notes are legato, so they will blend into one another and you will get a slow start to the sound and a slow end. Where these shapes overlap, you get chords. And what that means is that you can play quite a complex chord with just one finger or with one point of contact, such as a mouse. And that means that you can create very complex musical instruments that can be structured in such a way that chords and chord progressions can be easily accessible. As I said before, the instrument is highly customizable. You can change the color of each shape. You can change the note. You can change the size and the shape of each shape as well. Here is what we call, well, they're all called Clarion patterns. This Clarion pattern has 3 rectangles at the top of the screen and 3 rectangles at the bottom. This is a pattern that has been designed by a young eye gaze user. And they use the space, the dark space in the middle, in between those 2 rows of 3 rectangles, to navigate without playing a note. So they can get to any of the 6 notes using their eye gaze. And because the shapes are quite large on their screen, it means they have a high degree of control over the notes. This is, well, it looks a little bit like a clock almost. You've got a series of rectangles that form a circle, so they rotate as they go around. And each of these, again, is a musical note. They are loud on the outside and they're quiet on the inside. And this is a setup that was designed with a young musician that liked to play on the iPad. They really loved spinning their finger around and around and around the clock and making a rapid succession of notes that just spiraled and spiraled around. And this final slide is, well, a series of rectangles, again, with rounded corners, grouped into 4 overlapping groups. Each of these is a chord, and this is actually a chord progression from a piece of music that is played in open orchestras. It's a shame I can't do a live demonstration of the Clarion in action because yeah, it becomes very clear. But there are some videos on our website, and I'm about to show a video in a second showing a young musician playing the Clarion as well. Yeah, the Clarion is an accessible musical instrument. It works seamlessly on iPad. It runs on Windows computers. And because it runs on a Windows computer, it can be controlled by assistive technology like the SmartNav or eye gaze, or basically anything that can control a mouse, which means that it is inherently a very accessible musical instrument. So if we've got time, we've just got a couple more videos. So yeah, the next one is a video of a young musician who was one of the first young musicians to join the National Open Youth Orchestra.
Open up music.
1, 2 and 3, you're using the top one.
Hello, my name is Bradley Warwick. I am a member of the Southwest Open Youth Orchestra and I am 21 years old.
Brilliant, thanks everybody.
I have cerebral palsy which affects all my limbs. I use my communication device to communicate with using my eyes. I love being part of the Southwest Open Youth Orchestra. I feel a kind of freedom and belonging. Ashley plays piano and is very amazing. Connor also plays piano and is a good friend. Ben plays the instrument, which is amazing equipment. I used to make music with switches, but the instrument Open Up Music have made for me helps me be a better musician. It's called the Clarion and I am able to play it with my eyes. When I look at an object on the screen, I play a note. When I move my eyes around the object, I can change the quality of the sound. George plays the clarion with his head movements using a smart nav infrared motion sensor. At the Southwest Open Youth Orchestra they can make an instrument for anyone.
So just anticipate each change of the note, because I've got lots of time.
Orchestras are very important to open up to disabled musicians because it gives them the opportunity to perform with others. It enables me to get out and meet new people who also love music. I would love to make a career with music, so I hope this will all help. On the 3rd of June, the orchestra performed at the Bristol Colston Hall for BBC Music Day. It was broadcast live on Radio 3 to millions of people. I get a buzz playing music in front of people. To play in front of that many people was unforgettable. It was bloody amazing. Disability should never be a barrier to enjoying music and getting involved. Think you can't play in this orchestra? You are wrong, you can. Do it.
If you'd like to apply to become a member of the Southwest Open Youth Orchestra, go to www.openupmusic.org/apply.
It's really funny looking back at that video. That video was created about 4.5 years ago. So prior to the National Open Youth Orchestra, there was, as Bradley was saying, the Southwest Open Youth Orchestra, and even then, that version of the Clarion was one of the very early prototypes. So our time together is nearly over. I've got one more surprise, one more very lovely video to show you right at the end. But prior to that, if you would like to connect with our work, well, there's 3 Twitter handles here. There's the one for Open Up Music, so it's just at Open Up Music. If you'd like to connect with the National Open Youth Orchestra, that's at the NOYO, all one word, at the NOYO. And then, yeah, if you'd like to connect with me, please feel free. It's at Barry Faramond, which is BarryFaramond. So if we've got time, I'd like to leave you with just one more video. This is a video that was created this year by a young musician in one of the open orchestras. That have been continuing to provide music and orchestral practice to the young musicians in the school, despite all the challenges that they've been facing this year. It showcases the Clarion in its current form, so you'll really be able to see everything that I've been talking about. And yeah, it showcases a remarkable young musician as well. So I'll leave you with this final video.
Hello, my name is Ibrahim. I use a head tracker and a metal dot on my chin to play Clarion on my computer. At first, I found it hard to control the mouse. It was hard to keep it still when I wasn't supposed to be playing. Here, I used a blue switch under my chin to mute myself and give my neck a rest. With practice, I got much better at controlling the mouse. Now I don't need to use the switch because I can use the on-screen head tracker toolbar to mute and unmute, click, drag, double click, etc. This means I can edit patterns and create new patterns myself. Before I joined Open Orchestra, I have never used a head tracker ever, and I found using an eye gaze really tiring. And now I use the head tracker not only in music but in all my lessons. It means that I can be independent and do some of my work all by myself. It makes me feel confident. It makes me feel free.
Fantastic story, and so much emotion in the way that you hear the music and see how those instruments are being used. So fantastic! Thank you, Barry, an amazing winner of the Tech4Good Accessibility Award, and the best of luck for you and all at Open Up Music. And thank you for finishing our day off, or finishing our day off almost. I'm just going to bring my panel back in from this morning. Good evening. How are you doing? So we started the day, for those of you that weren't here, we started the day with Hector, Heather and Addy talking about what was going to happen today. Just a nice way to wrap up the day, I think, is just to check in, see what's been going on. First of all, if you missed it earlier, that Hector and I worked on content ideas over the last year, and Hector had these moonshot ideas, and we've had a couple of his moonshots today, and you must be so chuffed, Hector. They just came off so brilliantly. The leadership panel was amazing. To have those people together in the first place, but to hear what they had to say was just a wonderful way to start.
And we also talk about, you know, if you scratch beneath the surface of these stories, you'll soon find out if they're not real, right? You know, and what's great, I just think through that whole session, the way Corey moderated it and sort of dug into, you know, investigate a bit more, you know, the ambition's real, right? And I think that's what I love that we're starting to see in the, I call it accessibility, but maybe more widely the disability space. You know, it's like kind of a genuine faith in human beings that they want to get this into their organizations and get it right. And I just think that came across. And then the second one, I mean, honestly, this whole concept of tech diplomacy from Casper, it's like genius. It's like, and remember when we were riffing on it before when we were planning for the event, it was like, you know, he's Denmark and he's trying to get the rest of the world to listen to what the tech demands of Denmark are, right? And that's just us in the accessibility space. We've got the rest of the world kind of ignoring us, and we're Denmark, right? We want accessibility to get up there on the map, but we need to be a little bit more kind of, you know, front and center, go for it, you know, and hold people to account. So I just think, honestly, Mark, it's been great working with you, but I just think, you know, I think we brought some talent in. We got the talent in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Heather, you clearly the business stuff would be. I mean, it's amazing to hear from those business leaders, wasn't it? They're so stellar cast, really.
It was so good.
Anything in particular that you took away from that you think you can go back into Skyscanner sea level and say, by the way?
Oh, I mean, so much. I was just going to say, I mean, Casper, what a nice guy. Is he actually that nice?
Well, he's a diplomat. Yes. I guess it might come with the job description.
And Jenny as well, they're just fantastic. I loved when Sam mentioned about flights not being very accessible to book online. So yes, we know this. So I'm working on this, Sam, and I'm doing my best. So we've got a long way to go though. So yeah, I'd love to chat with her some more about it. All just brilliant ideas, a lot that I can take back, and a lot of emphasis on it being up at that leadership level to really make it work. That is something that, you know, we've been working hard on doing, and that we're just starting to get there and actually really seeing the benefits now that leadership team are starting to get involved. So hearing that again today is just such great backup that we're going about it the right way. Loved it.
And Addy, how about you? Anything in particular jump at you during the day? I know you were in on the Sightless Combat session as well, helping out with the PowerPoint. but I dipped into that one. That was fantastic. Just the show and tell nature of that is just brilliant, isn't it?
I just love. I mean, the day has been amazing, and the fact that we've had so many key people from industry, present. It was a big turn on for me. It makes the whole talking about accessibility organizations. It makes it so much easier when you know there's like so many senior people from biggest organizations in the world. They're on it now, so other people have some role models to follow. So yeah, I enjoyed all the sessions. The financial sector, all the stuff they're doing is pretty amazing, and they really stepped up, both in the digital sphere, making the websites and apps accessible, but just like things like, one of the companies, one of the banks mentioned that they were home delivering money, to people who couldn't get to cash point. So stuff like that was incredible. And yeah, Sightless Combat, he's just his enthusiasm for gaming, because when I lost my sight, I lost interest in games and I couldn't play them, but just to see his determination, and enthusiasm for it is incredible. And it's great to see that mainstream games are they're stepping up now.
Fantastic.
And the audience he's created for himself, I just think that's another thing. It's like we now live in a world where actually you're a gamer, but you live inside that community, and you can build a profile and you can build a reputation on that platform as somebody with a disability. I just think that's a huge thing. And I hadn't realized he'd set up his own consulting business. So plug Sightless Combat, like he's creating an empowering role for himself, and he's creating paid work, and because he's got huge skills and knowledge to share. So yeah, I love that session too, Addy. I thought it was amazing.
Just one thing to add to that. It was amazing how he crowdsourced a set of ads. So he had this woman called Jenna from America helping him in the UK play the game together, and it's just that kind of stuff is just incredible. We know that's
connectivity, right? It's like that's what connectivity delivers. People from different parts of the world connecting and just supporting each other. Right? Yeah, really powerful.
Well, somebody sent me a note saying that we had over 300 different organizations registered for TechShare Pro. I think we tipped the numbers about 400 at some point during the day that were actually attending. So there's 3 days. I suspect there's different days that will be relevant to different people. But I think the other thing that we're already starting to think about, I'm sure, is the big message and the thing that we're going to take away afterwards. And I don't, from today, this is very different to what we've done before. Last year we had a carrot and sticks conversation, and we talked about policy and the changes of policy. And this year we heard from Casper talking about the inside of that, and that conversation was really interesting. Hearing how somebody outside the accessibility community is going to see what see it very differently to us about changing policy, and then obviously the business stuff, talking about the ways in which business is rising to this challenge, and the opportunity for us to go and sort of connect in with that, I think is. It's a step on from where we've been in previous years. So I think that's a huge sort of boost for us in terms of beyond the event as well, where we can take this messaging out and share these stories around and really begin to put them into action. I noticed, Heather, there was a conversation about maturity models. Addy, no doubt we can introduce Sam to one. So and obviously blend it in with the Microsoft one. But that's that maturity, isn't it? It is that story about the big organizations changing their view and wanting to know more about what they can do and what they're not doing, and being prepared to learn about what's missing, just as much as putting it on the agenda, as you say, Hector. What's the action going to be? That will be the next stage, I think, in terms of change. So. Yeah, and I think just generally, this, but we've had some amazing people, part of the session. We've already had 30 people, I think, as part of the event so far today, and I think that it really is a sense of community. I recognise lots of people recognise one another. I haven't done very much networking in the space particularly, but I know there's lots of it going on, and I think there's a real sense of community being sort of boosted and inspired by the idea that people are listening and want us to do what we're doing and engage with them and do more. So, yeah.
There's also an interesting thing I've been reflecting on is, you built your banking specific narrative, then you've got your gaming specific narrative. They have a different flavor. Accessibility isn't just this one size fits all, right? It's like, everyone's got their own kind of focus and what's resonating. And then, Heather, in terms of that flight, that airline industry conversation that was happening, that's another thing that as Microsoft we really want to get involved in, because we want to share how we're delivering accessibility digitally. And flights, buying flights and all that kind of stuff. It's a digital experience now. So I think bringing Casper into play allows us to help him start to build some of those narratives as he's engaging across all these industries. Because I can tell you now, we're talking to all the industries about sustainability, right? We're talking to the airline industry en masse about sustainability. Well, we've got to get accessibility in those same conversations. We've got to make sure that accessibility doesn't just get left behind, but actually as the airline industry starts thinking about some of those other issues, we really use those kind of leaders who now know about accessibility and just get them to weave it into some of those wider policy discussions. I think that's what I'm thinking about.
It's you're spot on. Like, it's sustainability we hear a lot, inclusion and diversity we hear a lot, accessibility should be talked about at the same time, at the same level. It's a no-brainer. So that's definitely something that should happen. But what I love and what I always think about things like these events, everyone's so willing to just share their knowledge and their experiences with everyone else. It could be in a competing business, and it doesn't matter. I think we all have this passion for accessibility that just really shines through and wins over all of that other stuff. So it's a really special, lovely place to work. Lovely area to be in. So I just love it.
Cool. Well, we've had a good and very long day. I'm sure you have too.
Where's the sun gone, Addy?
Yeah,
the sun was there.
Yeah, I guess I was in the Bahamas or something this morning. Just one ray of sun coming through my window. Yeah, it's gone.
Tomorrow is Policy Day. There's an interesting connection into what Casper was talking about with the Accessibility Act. Of course, there's a session about that tomorrow, an update on what's happening with that. And I think that's it's a chewy subject. I was in the briefing. There's a lot going on there. There's a lot for different people to engage in. The carrot and stick conversation again tomorrow, which came up a couple of times, not least from Sam and Jenny and Casper. I think those are important areas that starts to bridge into how we're actually going to make the change happen. The other thing that we've got that has come up a couple of times, I'm really pleased that we're kicking the day off, is we're listening to what the needs of disabled people are. So we're looking at the data, we're looking at what the reality of life is, rather than starting with the technology. So Scope are going to be bringing some research in and showing us how disabled people's lives have changed through COVID. So that I'm looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to then moving into what we're actually going to do about it and seeing some of the activity around the public sector regulations, which are now quite mature in the UK. The GDS is going to be telling us what they're doing, how they're monitoring it. We've got Malin coming from Norway, talking about what they're doing there, which is always innovative, and she's always really interesting. So yeah, another great day tomorrow. So thank you so much for joining me this morning and for coming back in again this afternoon. I'm glad you've had a good day. And Hector, of course, huge thank you for getting it all together. That program was great today, and I'm looking forward to plenty more of it tomorrow. Accessible Smart Cities is going to round it off tomorrow. That's going to be one of the most popular sessions, I think. That's like a magnet for the community. So
check out Victor Calise on the from New York on the Smart Cities thing. No, he knows what he's doing.
He's really cool.
That'll be great.
He's just got a list. When we saw him last week, he had that list of things they're doing. That just we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. That just looks fantastic. So yeah, well, great. Thank you so much for joining me.
Fantastic.
And have a good evening, and I'll see you tomorrow sometime. Take care.
Thanks.
See you. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks. Great to see you.
And the same to you. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow. The doors open. I think they're open all night, to be fair. But we'll be networking from 9:30, and we'll be back here at 10:30 to give you a preview of the day. So thanks for joining us. Take care.